Good morning. It's Saturday, October 10th, and we're only a few weeks away from the election. About 3 weeks away from the election. And I'm not sure I've seen this much chaos before an election since 1968. That's what this election feels like to a certain extent. Chaos domestically and for different reasons than in 1968, chaos somewhat around the globe, but for different reasons than 1968. 68 was the height of Vietnam, November 68. 68 and going into 69. And thankfully, we don't have 17 and 18 and 19 and 20-year-old guys dying by the hundreds every day in Southeast Asia. At least today we don't have that, thank God. During that time, I was in my early teens, but already very involved. How could you not be involved? Hundreds of them every day. So we don't have that, thank God. And we don't yet have hundreds of cities burning to the ground like we did in 1968. Large parts of hundreds of cities. Not just one or two, but hundreds. That was 1968. The baby boom generation was able to turn that around somewhat. And in part, one, because millions of us took to the streets. Not a few. Millions of the entire generation went into the streets and protested. And along with us were many people who had protested back in the 30s and 50s. But in the 60s, it was the war and it was civil rights and the women's movement, the Indian movement. And it seems like my connection is not that good. All right. Hopefully it's a little bit better now. I'm going to read something that it's the very first page of the Pentagon Papers before the story, prologue. And if you don't know what the Pentagon Papers is, the Pentagon Papers was the news and other members of the press organizations, but driven basically by the Times and the Post. And they were able to find or obtain documents that the Pentagon Papers, that the Pentagon, the Army, the Defense Department had done a few studies, and the studies were kept from the public. But the New York Times and the Washington Post printed them and put them into a book form. And it informed the government, informed the people of the United States that the government had lied to them about Vietnam. It was self-evident, basically, but it was documented that the federal government of the United States had lied to the American public for 20 years about how we were doing or what we were doing in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. really my entire generation, over 60,000 people dead, hundreds of thousands wounded in a war that should have never taken place. The first page of the Pentagon Papers. Only a free and unrestrained press can effectively expose deception in government. And paramount among the responsibilities of a free press is the duty to prevent any part of the government from deceiving the people. Let me read back the last part of that. And paramount among the responsibilities of a free press is the duty to prevent any part of the government from deceiving the people. That's in the American Constitution. It's called and it's in the First Amendment. Press. It's not the Second Amendment. It's not the 10th Amendment. It's not the 20th Amendment or the 100th Amendment. Well, there's only 27 amendments. It's the First Amendment. It is one of the most important things and informed people so that people can make decisions that are informed and based on reality. And I read this because we have never been so far away and detached from reality as we are now. Not in my entire lifetime have I seen anything like this. The American government, not only Trump, but Trump right now is the black hole of deception. The entire COVID thing is tragically, it's not a joke. It's because of him and his people may be damaged for life or die. And in my opinion, it is premeditated murder because he was well aware of it, and his doctors lied. They are deceiving the public, and that is a crime. The deceptions are a crime on so many levels. We are going into this election with an executive in the White House who's doing everything possible to disrupt in a democracy. And even if he loses, even if Joe Biden gets, and I think he will get, a gigantic landslide in not only the popular vote, but in electoral votes. You need 270 to win. I think Joe Biden will come close to or exceed 400. I've run the numbers over and over and over again. And the deception is that this administration is working in numerous ways to disrupt and destroy the elections. One, electronically. Two, of course, trying to destroy the people of this country, to deceive people in all types of ways, to not vote, especially by mail, to keep people from voting, and where they tried to close all the polling places down or bring a ballot to a polling place, close them down, including in Cuyahoga, where over a million people, a couple million people live, 800,000 voters, and there's a They're trying to limit it to one place where you can drop off mail-in ballots. That's deception. People's ability to vote. Closing election places, hundreds of them all over Georgia and North Carolina, but almost only in African American locations where people are poor, people are going to vote Democratic by and large, and they are closing those places down so that the remaining places people will have to wait. First of all, just to travel to those places will be a burden. It is a disgrace, but it is beyond that. It is a crime. It is a violent crime against our way of life. It is a violent crime against our election process. It is a violent crime that this administration is attempting in numerous ways and steal the election. Dictatorship. There is no other word for it. It is dictatorship. And that is where we are, in my opinion. I was watching. I don't watch Bill Maher as much as I used to, but I watched him the other night, and he did remind me of our process. Excuse me. Um, Bill Maher reminded me and everybody else who watched him that we do not directly vote for the president. And I've been saying since my first show how the Electoral College is a joke in itself. It is a vestige from slavery, the slavery system. The Electoral College, it represents slavery and the slave system. And maybe soon, hopefully, we'll get rid of it once and for all. But this election, we still have it. And we need to get rid of it. But because we don't vote directly, for everybody to understand that Florida goes Democratic by 1,000,000 votes. I think it'll go Democratic by maybe 100,000 votes, but let's say 100,000 votes. So all 29 electors are supposed to vote for the winner from Florida. There are 29 electors in Florida. They have 27 congressmen, and they have 2 senators like every state. So 27 plus 2 is 29. The amount of electors every state has is based on congressmen plus senators. The minimum amount of electors is 3, because you have 2 congressmen, 1 congressman at least, and 2 senators. So you have 3. So the minimum, excuse me, is anyway. So Florida has 29. So those 29 officially, like every other state, in December, I believe it's December 14th, will officially vote. They officially vote by the popular vote. It is not written anywhere. I don't believe I don't believe, and I'm going to have to review it, so I'm kind of being a little premature, but I don't believe they are restricted by law to go with the popular vote. And there have been times during the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years where electors have voted for other people other than the popular winner of that state. So it is very possible that, let's say, Florida turns out to be the crucial state as it did back in 2000. And both Biden and Trump needs Florida to win. Well, Biden, let's say, gets the popular vote and looks like he won. But then the electors, these 29 individuals, actually vote for Trump. They could be corrupted in many, many ways because they're human. And that is a very big possibility also. That process of corrupting enough electors in enough of the key states where the vote is simply stolen. Not only the popular vote, but the electoral college vote. That has, in a way, happened once, or at least once, that I'm aware of. I believe it was in the 1820s, where there was this great grand deal, and unfortunately, I didn't read about it right before or refresh myself right before I got on today. But I believe it was Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was running, and Henry Clay and a few others. And they kept the vote away from Andrew Jackson. I believe that was the first time. There was a second time in the 1880s, I believe, and a similar thing happened where there was a deal in Congress, and the deal also happened in the 1820s. That's if it goes to Congress. If it does go to Congress, again, and I've mentioned this, if it goes to Congress, every state gets only one vote. And right now in Congress, even though the Democrats hold the House, they hold most of their caucus is in New York, is centered in New York and California. They're all over the country, but a lot of the Democratic Congress people are really from only a number of states along the coasts, and so they don't have the majority of the states in Congress. They have the most people in Congress, congressional seats, by about 30. But most of them are centered in New England and Mid-Atlantic, California. And so the Republican would win because they hold 26. They would have 26 votes, and the Democrats would only have 24. So we are in a very we're in a very challenging time. We're not quite sure how this election is going to play out. You have to hope that every state that goes for Biden wins, goes for him by a very large plurality, and there is no question. And that we know that's not going to happen in every one. It'll be close in a number of them, and it is close. I think Biden will have enough electoral votes in states that win large. And the ones that are close, I think, even if they are close, it won't matter. That is the key, is that he gets 270 electoral votes or more on the night of the election, without question, without it being close, in those states. He's going to have California, which is 55. He'll have New York, which is 29. He'll have New Jersey, which is 14, and Massachusetts, which is 11. And he'll have a bunch of other states, Illinois, which is 20. I think he's going to have the entire Great Lakes region, with Ohio being a question mark and Indiana maybe being the only Republican state in the entire Great Lakes region. North Carolina and Georgia are obviously both key battle states. Georgia has 16 electoral votes, North Carolina 15. So that's 30, right? 30, 31. Arizona looking like it's going blue. And looks like the Southwest is going to be a very solid blue area. And the really most amazing thing is Texas very well could go blue, and that's 38 electoral votes. And if Texas goes blue, it won't matter what the rest of the country does, because it will be a landslide for the Democrats. So, so that's where we are, and I truly believe it's somewhat ironic that Biden is now calling for the arrest of Biden and Clinton and all of that. The funny thing is, the Democratic Party has been on the Republican Party since the 1980s. And one of the reasons why, if you wonder why people on the left like me are so pissed off at the Senate Democrats, is that since the 1980s, they should have been going after Reagan and Bush Sr. and Bush Jr. and putting all three of them in jail for war crimes. And they never did, among other things. They never did. And that's why, among other reasons, why progressive Democrats are so pissed off the Democratic Party, because they have not done the right thing. And so they've left the Republican Party to grow into a fascist organization without question. Well, let's get over it. That somewhat resembles Nazism on many levels when it comes to immigration and other things. And uh, supporting a local police agenda that looks like Nazism and Gestapoism, where you're pulling people over, and if somebody doesn't have their driver's license, they beat the crap out of them and put them in jail. It's incredible what we have turned into and have allowed and have resembled a fascist Nazi Gestapo agenda on a local domestic level. And it's been going on forever. But it's gotten to the point, really, where now you have what remains of a free people trying to fight back against an established militarism. And I don't know. Nobody knows where this is going to lead. Nobody does. Because the established powers that be are fighting very hard and pushing back. And I talk about the press, a free press. And it doesn't exist in the United States. It really doesn't. When we were growing up in the 50s and 60s and 70s, we had numerous ownership of the press that was spread out. You could go to local radio stations that were owned by an individual, one person, and he would own or she would own 3 or 4 local stations in the middle of Iowa or the middle of Ohio and Texas. So you would have actually hundreds of owners of our press and our radio and of our TV, hundreds of ownership spread out. That's what a democracy would look like, does look like. A lot of voices. You had Spanish radio, Spanish-owned radio, and other Italian and Portuguese and French and left wing and right wing and everything under the sun. And all of that has by and large disappeared. The press and the airwaves of this country are basically owned by 6 companies, 6 CEOs. And the news, whatever is left of it, is just shoved aside, irrelevant. And that if something important happens, laws were made from the 1980s, and because of the 2001, because of the Twin Tower incident, the Patriot Act was passed. And among the things that the Patriot Act and a number of other acts created was a filtering of the press, of the news, especially overseas, so that all the news had to be reviewed first by the Defense Department. Can you believe that? That's the law now. That is the law now. Where are the reporters that should be in Syria? Where are the reporters that should be in Yemen, in Palestine? Where are they? During Vietnam, and World War II and Vietnam, you had reporters on the front lines. They put their lives at stake for a free press, for information coming to the American people firsthand, no filtering. You are propagandized. If you are watching this, and if you're an American, you are propagandized. And you have been since the 1980s. And if you watch cable news, you have no idea what reality is. None. Because it's all regurgitated garbage. If you're not getting your news from a variety of sources that include from overseas and from places on the internet that it's pretty hard to define, actually. And it's pretty hard to make sure that anything is real in today's world. Because the number of professional journalists, the whole industry has basically disappeared. So that's what the American people have to rely on for their information. I guess every once in a while, real stories break through, and reality breaks through every once in a while. What is about to break through is the reality of an economic depression that is more enormous and more deep than the depression of the 1930s, especially if this government does not provide more help to the people of this country, to the cities, and to the states. If they end up providing more help, more taxpayer dollars to uh, large corporations, there will be, the truth will just never filter in. So that's where we are now, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. Sorry I went 30 minutes. My videos, I've tried to cut them down. There's too much important stuff going on, I feel. I could talk for hours, and but I'm going to cut this one short at 33 minutes and start a new one almost immediately. Thank you, and talk to you later.